Look at that.
Excellent. We are in great shape. Well, welcome everyone to Improving Dermatology and Wound Healing Clinical Trials, how to leverage mobile imaging and EDC, electronic data capture technology. I'm Tim Cobago from ImageIQ. With me today is Shanda Bland, our Chief Operating Officer.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Shanda, you were an unadvertised benefit to the webinar.
Crashed.
Yeah, she crashed the webinar.
Crashed the party.
But very honestly, as we were doing some rehearsals for this and getting ready, some of the work that Shanda does on the ground with our folks who are doing mobile imaging, we felt she added a lot of value to what we wanted to talk about today. So thank you for joining us, Shanda. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
While we're letting the last set of people show up, let's go over a couple of things logistics-wise. We've got about a 45-minute presentation and demonstration. We're going to do something a little bit weird that we've never done on a webinar before, is that we're going to turn on the webcam, and we're going to show you a little bit of what this technology can do for you live on web cams.
And if I had known that,
Yep.
and known what a rainy, nasty day it was here in Cleveland, I may not have volunteered.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So, the benefit of a webinar, right, is you get to chat with all of our new friends and old friends and all that good stuff, and don't have to be seen until Tim has a great idea. Let's turn the webcam on and show them what we have.
Sorry about that.
So hopefully it's a great experience for you guys, and it's something new for us. So.
Yep, absolutely. We'll have some time for questions and answers, but what we're not going to do is do that live on the phone with all of you out there. We have a tendency to hear work from home people have dogs and things like that. So you'll all be on mute. But if you type in your questions, there's a little question box on the control panel on the side. If it's gotten small, you click the little orange button. It'll slide to the left for you. And there's a question panel. You're welcome to type us a question whenever you like, and we'll grab those at the end of the webinar. And like we said, the recording will be available at Imaging Analytics University when we are done. I'm guessing it'll probably take us till end of the day today, maybe tomorrow kind of window, but certainly this week that'll be available. So here we are. I'm Tim Cobago, President and CEO of ImageIQ, and joining me is Shanda Bland, who's our Chief Operating Officer. At a high level, Shanda and I have quite a bit of experience in the medical imaging space. I've got over 15 years of experience prior to coming to ImageIQ in radiology, diagnostic radiology imaging, and making PAC systems and things that radiologists use. For the years here I've been at ImageIQ, we've definitely got more into the clinical trial space, preclinical imaging, all that kind of stuff, more imaging analytics than just image management. Shanda comes from an interesting background, and where she was the Chief Operating Officer for a diagnostic imaging center. So actually people who saw patients and dealt with
more from the clinical care perspective.
Which
works really great with our clinical trials, because we're doing work with sites and subjects and different systems and all sorts of things that come into clinical care all the time. So certainly a lot of fun and taking those experiences and seeing how we can shake them up here at ImageIQ.
You got it. Well, thank you again for being with us. Hey, one real quick about ImageIQ. ImageIQ is a company that looks a little bit like a core lab, a little bit like a contract research organization, but we really specialize in imaging for the biosciences industry. That's what we do. So we're kind of putting on the free webinar here today. And our main mission really is to be your imaging experts, whether you're doing preclinical research, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 clinical trials, device trials, post-marketing trials, and work like that. We're here to be your imaging experts. We do that with software, we do that with image expertise, and our goal is really to let you focus on your science and your products. So that's who we are, and why we love the imaging thing. So today, we're going to talk about a different kind of imaging. Real quick, this was literally a last-minute ad. One of the things that we're kind of getting into here, and if any of you want to do this, if you haven't heard of this thing called Periscope, there was this weird story, I'll tell you the 30-second version of it, that I was walking with a friend of mine, and all of a sudden he starts talking to his phone. I'm like, what are you doing? He's on Periscoping. And it's a live video streaming kind of thing. So we've kind of gotten into that at ImageIQ, and earlier today I Periscoped the setup of the webinar because we're doing the webcam, we got the lights out and all that kind of stuff. So if you get a chance, follow us on Twitter, our Twitter handle @ImageIQ, and you can follow us on Periscope. Once every 3 weeks, I come up with some weird idea, and I decide I'm going to show you what we're having for lunch, or talk about.
It's always weird. It's always fun. He shows up to the staff here and in their face and says, "Hi, tell them what you're doing."
Tell them what you're doing. Yeah, exactly. Which they love. That works out really well. So real quick, if you've attended any of the ImageIQ webinars before, we like to start with a story. And so this is a story about 1906. In 1906, there was a football team from St. Louis University. And they realized that over the off season in football, that a new rule was instituted. And they discovered that at this point in time, at the start of the 1906 season, that the forward pass was now a legal football play. And they figured it out, they practiced, and in a game against Carroll College, the first touchdown pass was thrown in September of 1906, so well over 100 years ago. St. Louis University, a relatively unknown football power, completed an undefeated season that season, outscoring their opponents 407 to 11, which is effectively, over 11 games, is an average score of 37 to 1, all because the rules changed, and they won. And so that really kind of sets the foundation for what we want to talk about here today, is that we see that the rules are changing in photography, for dermatology, wound healing, in terms of running clinical trials and acquiring those images. And that's really what we're seeing. So we'll keep referencing the forward pass throughout the webinar.
Well, I don't know much about a forward pass, but I do know about changing roles, and certainly we juggle those all the time. So maybe we can bring the two together and see where we end up.
Sure, you got it. So, you know, look, we talk about mobile imaging, and I thought it'd be fun just to take a look at where we've been relative to medical imaging and what's been going on. You know, a long time ago, imaging wasn't mobile. You would take your patient or your subject to see this guy and that camera, and you went to the studio, and that was certainly interesting. And things have really progressed. You know, for the advent of good, you know, consumer level or even prosumer level 35 millimeter cameras. This was actually just a picture of, it's not my actual, but my very first camera. I love it, right?
Absolutely.
We moved through, and then people said, well, that's great. I can take these pictures, but I can't tell if I got a good one or not, especially for medical research. So those guys up in Rochester invented Polaroids.
And shake it.
And shake it. Yeah, you got to shake the picture, right? And so they invented Polaroids. Now you could see the image you were taking. You could make sure you got the right image and it was pretty good, but you still had to manage the picture somehow. You had to put it in an envelope or send it somewhere. So
hopefully no long-term archive.
Right, no long-term archive. They didn't last for long, right? They got weird colors. Then, of course, somebody figured out that you can take digital photography and create digital SLRs, beautiful pieces of equipment that take great pictures. You can see them immediately, but you still have to manage uploads and stuff like that. And the rules kept changing, even to the point where folks are now taking pictures of the inside of us by giving us a pill.
Okay, well, let's not go down the pill road, because that's a whole different type of imaging. They are very cool. So let's stick with that digital SLR. That's really what we're doing today, right? For medical photography and clinical trials, is the digital SLR as the platform of choice. And so let's deep dive into that and look at the current process and kind of where we are.
Sure. So, you know, for those of you who take pictures in your studies, wherever you are in your studies, you know how this works. But I think it's important to compare and contrast why things are changing. What technology, you know, our goal here is to help maybe inspire your imagination about how you can use the forward pass to win in your clinical trials, right? And so we wanted to kind of compare and contrast what you can do now with what you're doing now with what's coming, or what's here, if you want to even think of it that way, right? So the current process, and Shannon will walk through this relatively quickly, right? Because folks know how this works. You know, you encounter your subject and you take a picture according to a protocol, probably written, right? You've got the protocol. Well, it's written somehow. It may be digital. You may have it on something, but you've got a written protocol. You're taking a picture of the subject, right? And maybe multiple, but that's great.
Sure. And so then the photos are in the camera, and the photographer probably looks at them, makes sure that he or she thinks they've got them.
Right.
And now we need to get them off the camera.
Right, exactly. And so you get them off the camera, and sometimes that's cable, sometimes that's moving the SD card, sometimes it's Wi-Fi.
The cool Wi-Fi.
Yeah, cool Wi-Fi
thing.
Yep.
But you've got to then, you know, the camera names those photos. So you've got to convert that to get the subject ID on them so that those can marry up and live together.
Right.
So hopefully you're still kind of engaged in the moment as you're doing this, and no one interrupts, and there's not a ton of subjects on the camera card. Or on the camera,
we'll talk about that when we get to the compliance section. Yeah, that's a good point, for sure. So then you've got to get the image to someone, right? Because your medical photographer is out there taking the picture. Maybe it's a medical photographer. Maybe it's somebody at one of your sites.
Oh, wait, we can upload these to Walgreens.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, I do that all the time. Hey, if you haven't done this, by the way, this is great. You know, you can upload things to Walgreens.com or one of your local drugstores and then have them print at a remote location. And that way, like I do this, like my in-laws are in Texas, right? So I'll take pictures of the kids and print them to their Walgreens in Texas, they swing by and pick them up. So you could just run clinical trial imaging that way.
Well, we could, right?
Yeah.
You could have the photographers disperse at all the sites, upload their photos, Walgreens.com, and then at the sponsor's local Walgreens.
That's a great idea.
I don't think that's going to work, though, do you?
No, that you have to go back to the compliance.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that is funny though. That would be really cool.
That would be kind of cool. Except then you're back to print photography, and why did you take digital photos, right?
Exactly.
So that probably takes us down the wrong road.
So somehow you have to upload these things. A lot of people are burning CDs, maybe sending the SD cards, put them on. So, we use a lot secure hard drives where you get the hard drive and it's got a code on it, so you can't get what, there's ways to do that. FTP, yeah, you got it. But then ultimately you need someone to independently QA these things. That's the state of the art today, right? Because someone other than the photographer needs to look at them at the right point in time. The problem you have today is that takes time. And you all know it. And this timeline, we specifically didn't put anything on the timeline, right? This could be a day, it could be an hour, it could be several days where you cut this thing over several days.
And so where we're seeing the advancement through a lot of our clients is the discoveries are very quick solutions to problems patients and subjects have today, right?
Right.
And so they need to go faster.
They need to go faster.
And so through lots of discussions with clients, we said, we think we've got a better solution.
Should I press page now?
Let's.
Okay, let's. What we're seeing now is that you can start taking these pictures in really a telemedicine, mobile research, lots of ways to say this, taking the imaging to the subject and all that kind of stuff, but effectively something we're calling EDCIQ Derm, which plugged into our cloud-based image-enabled electronic data capture solution. But what you basically do is you ID the subject, you take a photo, you upload the photo, and it all gets QA'd, all real time, all kind of instantly. And so
that's really cool, but I think they want to see it.
Yeah. So
right? Because who wants to sit in a webinar and just hear about how something works?
Yeah,
so what do you think?
I think
we can share the webcam?
This is where we're going to do the webcam thing,
okay.
people. So hang tight.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. I'm going to press the button. So hey, here's the deal. If you're doing this on, I think hey, hi everybody. Good morning.
Hopefully we're live.
Hopefully we're live. If you're doing this on your GoToWebinar, probably the video window came up on top of where you're seeing our slides. So you're welcome. I think if you click on the little middle bar, there's a middle bar there. I think if you click on that,
you can resize it.
You can resize it. You got it. Exactly. So what we thought we would do is show you a quick demo of what mobile imaging looks like. And then that's going to set the stage for all the rest of the things we're going to talk about.
Okay. So you want me to...
You walk through, you talk, I'll drive.
Okay. Perfect. And so what Tim's going to do here is first he's going to log in. We're going to use our credentials to log in to the app. You can't do that and talk. Okay.
No.
So we're going to log in, and based on his credentials that he puts in the application, we're going to get a specific workflow for his user.
Right.
And so that workflow is going to give him a list of subjects in this case. These are all test subjects in a test database. We're using our friends at Controver's concept here for a trial. Right. But this is all in a test database, test subjects, all these kind of things. So Tim, I think subject number 4 just came in.
Okay.
So he's gonna
there you go.
Press subject number 4.
I'm gonna try to hold this here while I do the rest of it.
And I think it's wonderful that he holds it in front of me, but that makes me so much better.
Okay.
So the first thing we're going to do in any good medical situation is we're going to try and verify something about the subject to make sure that the right images get in the right record. Right now, in a clinical trial, that's tough because we don't like PI or PHI in there. So these questions could be anything. You can come up with a secret word, a secret question, whatever. In this case, we're using date of birth and gender because that seems to work. And then the next situation is actually taking them photos. Sure. So this is protocol dependent. You can go ahead, Tim, please.
Okay.
Tim's going to go ahead and take some photos, and you'll see all sorts of interesting things on our...
Oh, that was bad. That was out of focus.
That was bad.
Okay, that's better. Okay, that's our speakerphone.
As Tim takes these photos, you're going to see that it goes to a pending review status and then an approval or rejection. Based on that, we've got the folks in the back doing some QA for us, and they will... We've asked them the first set of images to go ahead and approve them. So as the images arrive, they will be reviewed, they will approve them. We're going to get to the good stuff on the QA and what happens in a rejection workflow and all that in a few more slides. But this is the process of how it works.
Right, and so you can see...
So you can see the real-time results come back through the app. this would be tailored to any specific protocol that was applicable to the specific trial. And this one is specific to 3 images because of the nature of
that's the way it goes. Yep, so all 3 of my images were approved.
Yep, and then the workflow takes him to a different solution. You know, it takes him through the next path, which says go ahead and complete the image. Now, when these uploaded, what happened there was it uploaded into the EDCIQ, where someone logged in with their credentials, and based on the status of being an independent reviewer, they got the review images screen and had this dialogue to approve or reject, enter a message if the image was rejected, to be able to tell the photographer something. So it's not just good enough to pick up any iPad and take photos,
yeah, you don't
right?
have to do that.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's really about the whole solution and where do the images go once you take them. So,
okay. So we're going to go away for now. I'm going to press the go away
absolutely.
button on the webcam.
And let's talk a little bit about the EDCIQ and what it is doing there in the background.
So at the bottom line, folks, and this is kind of I think the point of this webinar is that, you know, we now have the capability, you know, all the technology has come together where we can actually talk about mobile imaging. You know, when we think of medical imaging historically, you think of CT scanners, MRI scanners, and on X-ray machines. And, you know, you type in patient ID numbers and you identify the patient, then you acquire the images, and that patient data and the images stay together. And in photography, that doesn't happen. It's harder, right, because of what we talked about before. So really, what we're talking about is integrating this mobile platform into that little circle in the whole story of the EDC, where you have an integrated camera, you have a processing platform, you have workflow, network connectivity, and communications. And you put all those things together, and it gives you more power than you would normally. And really what we want to talk about, and what we're going to spend the rest of our time together here on, is now that you've got the concept and you kind of see it and see where we're going, we're going to talk a little bit about the technical realities and some of the things that you can and can't do and how this helps you in your trials. And by doing that, you'll understand that, you know, all the stakeholders who touch your trials, whether it's study sites or your image readers, your CROs, biostats folks, you, sponsors, really now have more real-time data available. It's going to help you save money. It's going to help you stay in compliance, and it's going to help you be more creative. And I think that's, for me personally, that's the most exciting part of this story, is that we talk to so many people. There's so many challenges. They just say, you know, I'd love to do imaging if only I could, if only this, if only that. I'd love to take more pictures or whatever. And so we kind of try to capture some of those quotes, right? And
we hear lots and lots of questions from folks as we're talking to them about projects or really launching a project and working through the early steps. And these challenges come in various questions. You know, well, what's going to happen to the images? And isn't any old EDC? You know, why can't I just do this with my normal EDC?
Right.
And all sorts of things come up. But we thought we'd take all these questions, throw them up on the whiteboard, and look at what those common threads are about the challenges. So as we did that, we really came up with, you know, satisfaction issues for the subject and site, things like enrollment and retention, speed, cost, and logistics, which always go hand in hand, and compliance is always an underlying thing.
Right. What
seems to always start our conversations off, and this is where we always get really excited, is that we start conversations about quality and better science and how to do things creatively that really raise the level, you know, the rising tide.
Right.
You know?
Yep. Exactly. So, you know, if you were going to sit back and you're thinking about doing a trial like this, and you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go with this whole mobile device thing. That's a great idea. You might get some pushback, right? You might have people go, oh, well, you know what, the camera quality in those mobile devices isn't as good as a digital SLR. True. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're talk about the value of real-time QA, and then we're going to talk about what that does for you in terms of doing effective imaging. So let's start real quick. For those of you who recognize the thing on the upper right there, that is an old 35mm strip of film, and I dare say that at least my kids will not recognize what that is when they're older. So that's a shame. It is a shame. But the thing on the left is an important thing. That's actually a digital sensor that converts light to digital images.
And any of you who like prosumer photography and are into the DSLR thing and change your lenses will certainly recognize that.
You got it. You got it. So anyway,
so how do those compare to what we can do today?
Yep. So I think a big part of that is that you need to look at, you know, everybody talks about megapixels, right? That's the first thing you talk about. And so you've got an iPhone 6, for example, shooting at 8 megapixels. A Galaxy S6 Edge is shooting at 16, and like a nice Canon 60D is shooting at 18 megapixels. So that's kind of exciting. You know, but things like sensor size, focal length, aperture, all this stuff, but the bottom line is we're getting to a point now where 8 megapixels is enough to get a really good digital image. Let's compare it. And this is the forward pass concept, right? I'm sorry. The forward pass concept is that, you know, until somebody thought about a forward pass, you know, you just kept running the ball, right? Well, the idea is if you don't take a risk and you don't take a jump, then you never move forward. And so here's an interesting fact, that if you were to scan in that piece of film and say, well, resolution is important, you would have to scan in that film at roughly, that's negative, at roughly 50 megapixels to get effectively the equivalent resolution as that's available on the film. So
even that digital SLR that's being used as kind of the state of the union today is already taking a step down.
You got it.
And so then how do the mobile technologies really compare?
Right.
And in our tests and processes, they compare really well, and they do what they need to do. So let's jump to effective imaging and see if they are effective.
Yep, right. So, you know, basically, when you talk about putting a computing platform in place, you get a whole bunch of really good things, right? Now you're in an environment. You're in an environment where you have an app for guiding the right image acquisition in QA. You know, what you saw in the demo was we took 3 pictures. That just happens to be for that particular client. They like 3 pictures. It could be 1 picture. It could be 2 pictures. It could be a video. I mean, there's all sorts of new and exciting things you can do now because you have the framework of a computing platform, right?
And so then your protocol can really evolve to be what you need it to be.
Right.
So that can determine how many images you need, and then the app can support that protocol to make sure you have good protocol compliance.
Exactly. And so many times we talk to potential clients who want to do something very sophisticated, but they're worried that, okay, if I ask someone to take a picture just like this, the lighting is not going to be right, I'm not going to get the right region of interest and things like that, and I won't know until it's too late. I've lost the patient, and I won't know until late. And that's where, coupled with real-time QA, it really lets you get better data for all sorts of things, subjective analysis, making sure you get the right thing, and objective data. And, you know, at ImageIQ, if you've seen any of our other webinars, we're all into software that reads images and does image analysis. So we like getting really good data because the better it is, garbage in, garbage out, but really good in is really good out. And so that's a kind of a thing. But even if you're just trying to get good images, this real-time QA is kind of neat because you know,
let's talk about that a little bit further.
Okay.
And so the real-time QA works great because it does allow you to help with the workflow, make sure that you've got protocol compliance. And so Tim's going to log in here, and we'll turn on the webcam here shortly, and we're going to show you the QA in a rejection scenario.
Okay, and I got to log in.
Okay, and let's move this window a little bit, and I'll continue to kind of talk about the slide.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay.
And so as we're looking at the QA, we're doing those things to really eliminate the bad photos. So we can either have software processes run, or we can have human folks involved, whatever is appropriate, again, for the protocol, for the trial, for the process. When that image goes to the QA team, they have the ability to give that real-time feedback. That feedback will allow the image.
Selfie. Okay.
Will allow the image.
Oh, I missed the button. Hold on. Wait.
Oh no. Will allow the image to not only get better for that time point, but also the photographer to get better at what needs to happen. And so we've uploaded that image. I'm
not going to take the other 2, but the QA team's on standby. They know we're doing the webinar right now, and in theory, they will review the image, so it gets uploaded, and all this stuff. We'll talk about the compliance side of this later. But it gets uploaded, they're going to pen review. Now what they're doing is looking at the image and typing us a note to tell us that that image wasn't good enough, which is great because my selfie is going to get rejected.
Probably so.
That's not good.
But what this really does is it allows us to not lose any of the images that's important to the protocol. You know, at the beginning of the study, sponsors take great measures to make sure that that imaging protocol, make sure that all of the trial protocols work really well and are getting all of the data that are needed for the study.
Right.
So if you don't get the workflow right, and you don't get the protocol right, then sites get confused, right? We see that all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of things to remember when you're a site, especially at the different time points. And if you have subjects coming in early in that subject's lineage and then late in this subject, and you know, you're especially sites who are also doing clinical care.
Right.
They're seeing patients all day and trying to juggle all these different things. So, do we get a rejection?
My selfie's been rejected, which kind of stinks. But the idea is, if I'm encountering a patient now with this kind of platform, with this kind of technology available to all of you, connectivity, computing, I can get a message, and so you can see here, you can see I get the little red thing. My selfie's, that's kind of right. Oh, so I got a message that says, "Smile, it's webinar day." Thanks, guys.
That's awesome.
Appreciate it. So now what happens is I'm required to retake that image. I can't move on in the workflow. My other two images I took keyboard images. Those were approved. I now have to take this image again to move on in the workflow. So that's kind of how that works.
Great.
So we won't do that anymore. But
yeah, we could spend all day on QA and all of that good stuff. So let's run through some of the other challenges that we see using webcam off.
Webcam off, and then we'll go through a few other things. So, obviously the number one thing, you go to any conference, any webinar, anything, they say the number one problem you have is enrollment and retention of your subjects. You guys all know that. You live this every day. Well, we think that there is actually a benefit when you're doing medical photography of using this kind of platform for subject and site satisfaction, enrollment, and retention. So let's talk a little bit about that in terms of how you can engage the subject, how this gives a more interactive experience to the person taking the photos, and talk a little bit about mobile personnel. And then we're going to push the boundaries a little bit more, which is this concept of, subject managed imaging. We've already got patients doing subject diaries. We talk a little bit about how that maybe could work, right?
So subject engaging is always one of my favorite things because it's my customer service background and making sure that patient experience is as good as it can be. And really that's what it's about here. Engaged subjects don't drop out of studies, right? They're interested in it. They want to continue. And so how do we lose the clipboard if you go way back, right? And think about how we can do that leveraging all of the hoops that we need to put our subjects through to get the data that we need. So this is a familiar device. With our older patients, there's lots of great jokes about, oh gosh, what else is going into the, into the clouds, and what are you doing with that? And they want to be educated. With our younger subjects, they think it's super cool because it is super cool. Right?
Yeah, it is.
The personal questions, the identifying questions that you can put on there can be anything that you can think of. So you can be as creative as educating your subject in the beginning, hey, we're going to be taking images. It's super important that we get them, and it's super important that we put them with all your other data, because this is how we make, information be cohesive.
You're slipping into compliance.
Oh,
yeah, we're saving
easy for me.
We're saving compliance to the end, but yeah.
And so those can be, what is your favorite color? What's your pet's name? It can be your date of birth. It can be anything that, again, engages the subject because they know the person is there.
Yep.
Redundant paperwork, nobody likes that. So the date of birth thing, you can pro and con that so the cows come home. But it is comfortable and conversational. It's also very interactive, right?
Yeah, it is.
And that's for the site.
Yeah, well, and it is interactive for folks, who are taking the pictures, right? Because now they've got a familiar device. And most people, and most of your sites are engaging you in research because they want to be on the leading edge. They want to be on the leading edge of technology, medicine, helping patients get better. And I'll tell you, delivering them an iPad is pretty cool, or whatever. We happen to be an Apple shop, right? So we're using Apple for this right now. But you substitute Microsoft Surface or whatever you want in there.
Android device. And
to go back to my Periscope plug, at one point we were shipping out several hundred iPads, and I Periscoped. It was just cool to see them all getting built. Anyway,
But with this type of platform, we have a lot of other opportunities. One of the great things that we've been able to do is adult-oriented learning. As adults, we learn in many different ways, sometimes all at once. So we can now give a written competency test by answering the questions there that immediately go into the database to show that compliance there. I did it again.
Yeah.
I just really like the compliance thing, apparently. You can also do video learning, right? And you can do help guides that are in both written, documented form that they can hold in their hand, or the PDF version that they can see on the screen. And so those kind of things are really great.
Yep, and we've got a couple of questions coming in, so I'll just remind you, if you have any questions, type them in, and for those of you who have typed in questions, we'll get to those at the end. But they're both really good questions. While you were talking, I was previewing, right? So then the question is, how mobile can you go? And one of the things we've found that has been very interesting is when you get into kind of making the technology a little simpler, the ability to go into that restricted mode so you can't play Angry Birds on your device.
Yeah.
We get people who are a little grumpy about that, but that's a different thing. Going into that restricted mode, you can get people out there who can travel to the subject's location and take the trial to them, right? It eliminates the need for site visits for your patients, especially if you're doing something where you want to take images, let's say you want to take it every other day for 3 weeks to watch how wound healing's working or a drug is affecting someone. You don't have to have the site traveling to the patient, the subject, traveling to the site every time. Saves cost, saves patient frustration. That's great. And that's a big deal.
And you can always split it with the subject, right? Whenever you need to draw labs, have them come to the site. Whenever you just need a photograph, send someone out to them. So we've seen a lot of great results there.
And one of the things that's kind of fun about that is, I mean, gosh, Shanda, you said this earlier, right? I mean, it's probably everyone on this webinar probably right now within 30 seconds to get their hands on their mobile device and be online and ask the Google something, right? The point being is that when we send these folks out to the subject's home and to take these photos, they're still online. That real-time QA still happens because every one of the things we deploy happens to be cellular enabled. We don't mess with the Wi-Fi thing. It's just not worth it. And that's really cool. But where's it going, right? I mean, and I think this is kind of where it gets really exciting. And I made this up, but I call it subject self-service. The clinical trial selfie, right?
Yeah. Now we all know why you took the selfie.
Right. That's why I did.
ImageIQ, right?
Yeah.
But we are doing those subject diaries. We are doing subject pain scores. So you can imagine the scenario, and we've not deployed any of these yet. We're not ready, but you can see it coming, right? You can see the all the gears turning about what is possible. Are we at a time to develop an app that maybe the subjects can download to their own device?
Right. When you enroll in the trial, here's the code. You get this app,
and then with your diary, also take the selfie of the wound or whatever.
Right.
Are we to that point? Well, maybe if we're at the point where we can put guidelines or little. Have you ever taken the little birthday pictures that you can download from Disney and places for the kids, and they have the hat already on the background, so you just kind of put your face in the thing and take a picture and you file it. So if you could do that for, maybe it's a diabetic foot, study or whatever, and so you can put the foot in a mask so the subject gets a good picture. You can imagine that coming.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And, it doesn't end in pictures, right? I think the other thing that we have started to think about, and I know this wasn't the title of the webinar, so I don't want to get too far afield, but maybe some of you know people like this. You start talking about orthopedic work or rehab work where you want to see range of motion, speed of motion. We can start talking about video analysis, video capture, in a remote telemedicine kind of way. That gets really, it's not just wound healing and dermatology, so it's kind of exciting. But all of our orthopedic friends aren't here. They're all doing hip replacement. So look, we're going to move down our whiteboard a little bit. So we talked about quality and better science. We talked about subject site satisfaction and how that can help with enrollment and retention. And we hope that, that's interesting to all you. Now let's talk about some of the hard things, speed, cost, and logistics, right? At the end of the day, this is not very useful to any of you if we go, hey, by the way, it's $10 million, right? That does not cut it. That does not cut it. Let's talk a little bit about that. And, we're going to talk about a few things, right? The first thing that everybody, and this is just for fun and education, let's talk about upload speed. When you're out there, what does it take to upload an image? How do you manage all these devices? I mean, we're talking about trials and, we're talking about trials with hundreds of devices, hundreds of sites, if not thousands of devices.
Could be worldwide deployment.
Could be worldwide deployment. And more importantly, what are some of those price drivers? That is super cool. So,
you should definitely start with speed, right? This is a great math problem.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Look, bottom line is how quickly do images upload? Because when you're in the field, and for those of you who know, when you're in front of a subject, in front of a patient,
oh my gosh,
look, that's not the time to be futzing with your technology, right? It's terrible. And look, sometimes things get weird. Sometimes you're in a weird cell area, and it does take a little bit of work. I mean, I don't think anybody here is trying to be unrealistic about that, right?
Right. We've always been at I think everybody's probably been at some public event that you can get a call just fine, but your data's not working, right? Because there's so many people there together. So there's always complexities when you deal with cellular networks, just like Wi-Fi networks.
You got it. Yep.
How quickly do the images upload, and what size images do we end up?
Well, look, so let's pretend we got a 10 megapixel image because it makes the math easier. And a lot of times now we can JPEG these and get them compressed 10 to 1, 20 to 1, somewhere in that window. So if any of you have your device and you grab it real quick and you look at it, it says, hey, you've got LTE coverage up next to your cellular carrier in the upper left or wherever it is on your phone. If you're LTE coverage, that's effectively the next generation of 4G. You can upload a 10 megapixel image in 3 to 6 seconds. It's pretty quick.
That's pretty fast.
It's not bad. If your little thing says 4G, then you're talking about 4 to 10 seconds. If it says 3G, this is where, and again, we talk about, I like the forward pass thing. I'm a big fan of innovation. And when technologies come together and enough of them get stable enough, that's what enables change. That's what enables the forward pass. It's what enables all of you to think about doing this in a different way.
Right, catalyst.
Right? 3G networks, going to get a little more more tricky, right? And so now you're talking about almost a minute and a half to upload an image. And if you're taking 5, that can get a little long. Now, is it the end of the world? No, it's not. But you need to know that it's out there, and you need to know that that's part of the story. But it also moves through towards some logistics things, right?
Great. So let me dive into the logistics. So one of the things Tim mentioned briefly ago, restricting the devices.
Right.
And so that process is kind of in the device management realm. One of the things that is doable in that is the ability to also push out Wi-Fi credentials. So it is a situation for sites that are going to do imaging in the building, and
right.
in some of the buildings where it's a multi-tenant building on the whatever floor, and there's elevators and all sorts of things, you know, the cell service may not be as good as it would be if they were in the parking lot. And who wants to take every subject to the parking lot, right?
Right, yes,
so we can do both of those. We can leverage Wi-Fi at sites that need it. We can have cellular working in mobile areas. You could even, if you didn't need any mobility at all, you could go with a different platform and no cellular connectivity, right?
Right.
But that device management allows us to do a lot of different things, that and the app development that we're doing. So the app development allows us to restrict the device so that whenever it takes a photo, it's not in the photo album.
Exactly. Well, you know, we were joking about the Walgreens thing before, right? So here let's be clear. And this is like whenever you watch any of those shows on TV, like the reality shows, do not
try this at home.
Do not try this at home. Like, really? Would somebody try that at home? Okay, listen, here's what we're not, please don't grab an iPhone and go, hey, we can take pictures for our clinical trial. The compliance issues and security issues you have are monumental if you just do that, because you don't want to be uploading in the Walgreens or the iCloud or anything like that. So
what we're doing here is keeping the photos in the app. Yes, right. We're leveraging the technologies that Apple or whomever is making native to the platform. However, we're keeping the image right there. So as soon as it uploads and receives that handshake back that says, I got it from the EDC,
right,
then it's gone.
Right.
Right. And so when that subject acquisition is complete and that session closes out, the image is no longer on the device.
Exactly.
That makes those devices super easy to replace. People drop things, people lose things, things get stolen, it happens.
Right.
And then finally, I think the point there was, you know, pricing. And so we see that at every new Apple release. What happens to the pricing of the previous generation?
Well, and the bottom line is, look, the number of people buying, you know, 35mm cameras is small relative to the number of people who are grabbing iPhones and Androids and stuff like that. So what we're able to do is take advantage of that commodity product that's out there, lends itself to commodity pricing. So your price goes down, frankly. And, you know, there's another really cool part of that too, which is the devices, you know, and this was a slide we took out, but just so all of you know, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, that in your medical photography, what people are trying to do is lock down the protocol so you're getting consistent imaging and staying clear to focal length, exposures, all that kind of thing. So a lot of times these big cameras are getting locked down, sometimes with super glue, right? Well, you know, but that's what it takes. Sure, in the old technology, it's the right answer. It's the right answer to do that, right? Well, now what we can do is reuse the device, right? If you were running, let's just imagine you were running 3 trials at once, right? You could have,
and some of your sites had all 3 trials.
Even if all the sites had all 3 trials, right? You could have a series of one app or separate apps, lots of ways to slice and dice it. But the point is the same device could be used to take pictures with wildly different protocols, right? Because we have the ability to do that, right? And there's all sorts of crazy technical stuff we can get into. We didn't want to make this a totally technical meeting, but you know, the folks are opening up the APIs so we can have better access to the camera hardware now, so we can control things like exposure and focal length and all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. I don't want to go into that. Look, we saved the best to last. All of you are concerned. We spend a ton of time dealing with compliance, right? There are fundamental challenges with compliance. You're all in a situation where you have to deal with it. So let's just talk real quickly about device security, data security, auditing, and protocol adherence. And then we're almost to the end. And we promised you about a 45-minute talk. We're going to be right on the edge of that. We've got a handful of questions here that need to get answered too. So let's we'll rip through the compliance part, right?
So when the concept first came up, this was one of even my biggest concerns. It was like, what are we going to do to make sure we're compliant here, right? And so we go to the guide, right, and see what the federal, all of them. And there's this great language that comes out of one of our compliance webinars, right?
Right. Yeah. So ultimately, you as sponsors are responsible for ensuring that the investigation is conducted according to the plan and the protocols and in compliance with all applicable regulations. Right. So whether it's about image transport, analysis techniques, protocols, what data gets archiving, reporting, all this kind of stuff, it's important for you to make sure that this stuff is compatible with Part 11, compatible with Part 312, or whatever other parts there are, right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to run through relatively quickly a few things around auditing and reporting and how this technology helps you, because, and I'm not going to flip back, but I would have you remember that very first timeline slide we did with all the steps that happen. And at every moment in time when an image is moved, right, there's an opportunity for a compliance. That's a compliance risk, right?
Yes,
right?
Absolutely. And so as we look at those compliance standpoint, now we've got the opportunity to have that image natively associated to the correct subject and the correct site and the correct photographer. And oh, by the way, that photographer logged in now.
Right.
So not only do we know the credentials that was logged in, we know the date and time logged in. So now we can make sure that we've got really great time points. We know what time point it was without someone writing it in a manual log and all that good stuff. And we can manage those type of things. Now, location.
Yes, that's my trick question. I like that one.
Right?
Yeah.
So we do need to think about those things, right? Because when you're on a mobile device, there's great things like GPS coordinates, which is really cool if you're on vacation.
Well, yeah, and so again, this is, don't try this at home, but just so you all know, don't grab your iPhone or your iPad or your Surface or whatever, or your Android and go start taking pictures, because one of the challenges you have is that in general, and it's a great feature, your pictures are geotagged, right? The GPS on your phone is actually embedded in the metadata for the picture, and we know where you are. So here's the problem. Now you've got people visiting patients' homes or subjects' homes, right? So somebody, a mobile research professional, goes out to a subject's home, takes their picture, and if they don't do it with a system that is compliant or thought about this, the location of that subject's home is in the picture. That is personal identifying information. It's not hard to figure out who this is. And so those are some of the things that now we, in our, quite frankly, in some of these apps, and if you're looking at doing this, you need to ask that question. Hey, are GPS tags off these images? And because that's important. So that's why we called it the trick question, because it's neat to say every image is associated with the subject, the site, the photographer, and where they were, right? And traditionally, you would do that in an EDC kind of environment with their IP address. You would know what computer they were sitting at when they did that.
And so if this is a study that's only at the site, we're not doing a mobile. This is a great thing to enable.
Right. Enable it. Yep.
Because then we know exactly what site it came from.
Exactly. Right.
So there's lots of things that are built into the app that can guide workflows and ensure that that photograph, that anonymous picture that you took, is associated with the right anonymous patient.
Yep, exactly.
Right? And so, because it's really hard to match two anonymous things. How do you do that?
Yeah.
Right? So we do all of those types of things.
That's the roughest part.
It is.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, I took this picture, so I can't tell who it is, but now I forgot who it is, so
now what?
Now what? Yeah.
So that workflow enables that. And this is a Timism, so I'll let you take the last
one.
Well,
Yogi Berra passed away, so somebody's got to pick up the ball. Those who need to know can know, but only what they need to know, right? And that really is about auditing and reporting compliance. That you as a sponsor may need to be blinded to the content of your images. You don't want to know how it's going because you shouldn't, right? But you do want to know
if the time points were obtained, and if you're still on pace to complete the trial whenever you project it, and all of those other things.
Yep. So
there's some information you want all sorts of different people to know. Just like our ImageQA folks logging into EDCIQ in the back, they see the image that they're QAing.
Right.
Nothing more, nothing less.
Nothing more, nothing
less.
Right. Exactly.
So it's all credential-based.
It's all credential-based. So the other thing, look, we want to talk about is data safety. Everybody freaks out about this. We get it. It's important. Look, I'll tell you the story. If you've heard me on other webinars, I probably told the same story, so I'm sorry about that. But the bottom line is, I used to work as a contractor for the U.S. Navy, and we had to go through security audits. And I remember one time the guy doing the audit came in. He said, "Listen," and I can't do it right, but he basically said, "Listen, the most secure computer is one that's turned off and locked in a vault." Right? So look, anytime you turn any of these things on, put them on networks, there is risk. But I think what we're trying to help you all understand, so that if you consider using these kinds of platforms to really change the game and get in tune with the forward pass, right, that the risks are managed, right? So first of all, none of the data is stored on the device. We use the device as a conduit, right? So if I take a picture and I lose my device, no one can hack the device and get at your picture or your patient data, right? They're all centrally archived. That's important. The other really important thing, and I again, if we had all sorts of time to put this graphic back up, but the images are only ever in a controlled location. When you think about that original graphic, somebody took a picture with an SLR camera, that image is on an SD card. That has to get transferred to another computer, then burned on a CD, moved. Maybe the SD card gets sent in. But while it's on that SD card, it is not audited. It's probably not encrypted. It's certainly not in a situation without a lot of paperwork to ensure that it was deleted properly once it reaches its final destination. There's all sorts of areas where you have compliance risk in the old way of doing it. With the newer technologies now, we can eliminate a lot of those compliance risks, right? And ultimately, there's no personal identifying information. While we could have the secret question of what was your dog's name, or what's your favorite color, or what's your date of birth, or whatever, that's identifying information at a high level that doesn't have to be stored. It just has to be a gateway to let you access the camera, right? And that's kind of cool.
And so all of that really works when you have great protocols.
Yep, it does.
And so those are the things that guide what those securities need to be for your specific study. And those protocols are only as good as the folks that have been trained on them and that remember how to use them. Maybe the site was, qualified and brought on board, and there was a recruiting hold or something, and so there was a little bit of a delay. Is there a way to quickly get them back up to speed once the perfect subject walks through that door? And those are, competency testings that can be delivered in real-time basis on the device.
Absolutely.
We talked about those layers whenever we talked about the patient selfie, right? But it can also be done for the photographer in the site or in the mobile situation. Are we taking the right number of pictures? But those workflows can be strictly enforced whenever you develop them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the key part, right? Is you don't let somebody go and go, yeah, I know I was supposed to take 5 pictures, but geez, the patient, I just didn't. Well, now you got a problem. You got to write a deviation, or you're going to disqualify the patient. That's the last thing you need. So that is horrible. So we can enforce those protocols in the process. And interestingly enough, retakes are now documented and audited. Very few of you are running trials that run with 10 patients in 3 weeks, right? The point is, there's a learning process, and folks at the FDA encourage you to revise your protocol as you learn so that you can be more compliant and do a better job. So if you constantly are seeing retakes and you're like, man, people are just having a problem with this, you can revise your protocol to remove it. You can increase your training material to make it better. There's all sorts of things you can do, but now we've got those documented. It's not just hiding somewhere inside of a camera that the photographer on site goes, that wasn't good, erase, erase, erase. And it took them an hour to get the right picture. Now you know that. So anyway, look, there are a ton of really good questions that are coming in, and it is 10 to the top of the hour.
Well, good thing that we're
done.
Pretty done.
So look, let's wrap up, and then we're going to do your questions. So you're all welcome to type some more questions if you like. We'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. But the bottom line is, hopefully we inspired you a little. I mean, that's what we love imaging. We are an imaging company, whether it's CT or microscopes or medical photography or whatever. We love imaging, and our goal,
also like being really creative and pushing the envelope on what can be done. And so hopefully we've inspired you to do the same.
Exactly. So maybe you've seen that there's a forward pass and so the question is, are you going to finish the season 11-0 with a zillion points or not? So that's really cool. So those are the new rules. And we think with this new technology, when you take a mobile platform, you hook it up to an appropriate back end for QA and auditing and all that kind of stuff, you actually accomplish a lot that are concerns that we've heard from you on the whiteboard, right? So let's get to questions. Here we are. We won't turn the webcam back on. They can see our lovely faces here. And I'm not wearing a tie. I mean, holy cow. So let's go through a few of these questions, and if you have any more, you're welcome to ask. Let's see. Here's one. This is great, and let me digest it here. Can we speak a little more about our experience with dermatology studies? Here's a good one. Have you run into a PI that assesses clinical endpoints in a study through a photo instead of a subject visit, redness, that kind of stuff?
All right.
Absolutely. The answer is absolutely. As a matter of fact, most of the PIs are getting very, very comfortable and prefer doing study assessments through photos, right? So they are really into it. And what I would tell you is, and it's kind of like, I think a lot of people like electric cars, right? I mean, the concept of an electric car is really good, right? it's kind of this hybrid approach. What you're discovering is to take cost and time out and improve quality. What they're doing is finding an experience where they're like, look, if I could just take a look at that on this day, I don't need to see the patient, I just need to see it, right? So they'll insert that into the protocol and maybe reduce the number of, either do better science, right, do better study, and then say, you know, I want to see the patient in person, but now I only need to see them 2 times instead of 5, or 3 times, whatever it is. And they insert the photography part of this in to augment things when they want to see things. So it's kind of that, it's a kind of a Prius thing, right? It's kind of the hybrid drive.
As we talk to some of the physicians that we work with, specifically in dermatology, they're telling us, I've been taking photographs in my clinical practice for years, right? Yeah, I was taking them on an iPad as soon as the first iPad came with the camera.
Right. Yeah.
And they're taking them for their personal education, to educate their staff, to educate for their, you know, lectures that they do and things like that.
Yep.
So physicians are used to it and they like it. They're embracing it.
Yep. So here's another really good question, and this has to do with the real-time QA question. If the real-time QA, if it's personware, right, and sometimes we do integrate software into this because the protocol dictates that. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it does. Is it 24/7? The answer is it can be. Yes, absolutely it can be. Obviously, it depends on kind of a follow the sun with your sites. So, you know, for the most part, if you're running a North American trial, you're gonna kind of follow the North American timeframe. But if you're running a global trial, then yeah, we can do it 24/7. Another derivative question that came in, and I'm going to answer both of them at the same time, is who's doing the QA?
Right.
In what we showed you here today, ImageIQ trained image staff, and when we say trained, I mean we have training records for your compliance, all that kind of good stuff. But the ImageIQ staff was doing that. It's not far-fetched to think that, you know, somebody else could be doing that, right? You could have an image expert on your staff or sites or something like that. So there are other options. In our case, you know, most of our clients seem to want us to offer that service as an independent QA reviewer of people who are trained to look at images. But it
really harnesses the EDCIQ in whomever is appropriate can log in with those credentials. It also depends on, you know, real-time QA and what your protocol is, how quickly you're taking those images. Do you want them immediate? You know, all sorts of good things like that. So there's, if you can imagine it, we can look at it.
There's a couple of other really good questions. So we'll just keep rocking, and we'll get you to the top of the hour. What happens to the mobile app once the study's concluded? Does the sponsor keep the app? That's a good question. So there's a couple of things here that happen. So under that IT management, we actually have the ability to recall the app. So when the study is over, the app can go away. We work with the sponsor on that to decide when that makes sense, right? So you don't want to do it and then have to re-push the app out, but we do all this stuff managed mobily.
It also depends on if, you know, the devices were deployed from us and the device and the app show up together.
Right.
Then we're recalling the whole situation back. We're recalling the device back as well. If it's something like you mentioned in the patient scenario where a code could be given to download an app from the store, you know, that may be something that a sponsor uses for all their trials, you know, in a diary type situation. So it's very app and sponsor dependent on what the need is.
You got it. You got it. Here's another interesting one. And do we have experience partnering with home health vendor taking pictures during a home visit?
Yes.
Oh, you should talk about that because this is your, oh my gosh, yes, we have quite a bit of experience.
There are lots of options that are available here, and it depends on, again, the protocol, right, and what the need is. Do you want labs drawn at the same time? Do you just want the photograph taken? If you just want a photographer, home health isn't the right path to go down because home health is a very regulated environment, right? Where a photographer needs to be experienced in photography. So yes, we have experience working with, in fact, we work with a nursing company. We actually deploy medical research nurses.
So those nurses, if it were in your protocol, could go, I'm asking, this is a question because it's a follow-up question. They could go in, take the picture, and draw blood for labs.
They could.
They're qualified to do that.
Yes. In this specific situation, that's not what the protocol needs when the subject goes to the site because there's a lot of things that happen on blood draw day, right?
Right.
But those things could happen through nursing.
Yep.
It could be every site could have someone that goes out. You know, there's lots of ways to slice and dice.
Yeah, and sometimes we found that where the site have personnel that they'd like to participate in the study as opposed to contracted research. So
it depends on if it's a physician office type site versus a research type site who has
We've got a couple of other interesting questions that are a little bit more on the compliance side. One is, if a trial is conducted in the EU, does our system comply with EU's Data Privacy Act? The answer is yes, it does. Bottom line, for sure. You do have to deal with different cell carriers from a technical perspective, right? That's a little different than, but we can talk about that. That's a good one. Now, there's a couple of, here's another good one that I like around compliance and stuff like this. The question is, what is the training process for enrolling centers? Do we do that in person? Do we do it in webinar? Do we do it at a PI meeting? Something like that. So how do we get folks enrolled for this? It's kind of an interesting question because it's something we didn't demo specifically. We talked about in the fringe. I don't know. We won't pull up the website.
Yeah, we just didn't. We knew we'd be short on time if we ran some of the videos. So we choose more the better, right? So we opted for a multi-strategy attack. So we did PI training at the PI meeting. In one scenario was a follow-up web meeting. But there was a follow-up web meeting. And so we did some training. That way we did videos that actually are on the app, and the first time you log into the app, you're required to watch the video. And I want to spend 30 seconds on that because I think that it's a great question, and that is a great differentiator for, again, while we're talking about this forward pass concept, right, that this is changing the game, right? When you hand somebody a camera and you ask them to fill out a form or something, how do you know they're compliant? So what we've done, what the mobile technology lets you do now is we have integrated training videos. So when you log in, and again, we didn't show you this, but when you log in the first time, you can't do anything until you watch the video and pass a compliance test or competency test. And then the results of that are in the audit trail. And then what we've integrated into the system and what the platform allows you to, I don't want to make this about the ImageIQ's platform. The point is, mobile technology now allows you to think about the fact that, well, if this user hasn't logged in 3 months and done anything, we're going to require them to watch the video again and take another competency test. So you have the ability in the platform now to be at the point of, now, that's going to really tick someone off if they don't know it's coming. So you've got that. Education, again, is important. Right. And then, of course, the other part of the question was in person. We do often do site initiation visits where we go out and do in-person education with the sites, and certainly could in this. Yep. If other things are being handled at the site, then it may be more appropriate to do more video and documentation training or webinars and things like that. So we do a mix and match. Okay, last question. I'm going to do this. We're going to do it quick because we're right at the top of the hour. I want to thank all of you. One of the things that's amazing with our webinars is how many people stay to the end. Thank you all for being with us here today. Last question was, do you limit the number of images that you allow to be sent? The answer is not really, but there are some practical limitations relative to time, bandwidth, how long will it take you to upload images or a longer video? Right, so you got to think about that protocol. It's a great question, and we're buying these things with cellular plans, and everybody right now has monthly limits. Even if you have 400, you still have a monthly limit of what you can upload. So you just got to watch those kinds of things. It's a balance. Time, and very honestly, I would say the easy answer is we don't limit that. The protocol does. Well, the protocol. So in working through that protocol together, we would come with, okay, if you want to do this, here are the consequences on either a cost or a time situation, and so educating that together. You got it. Shanda, thank you very much for joining us at the last minute. I know in the last 48 hours you're like, you can help. Thank you all for joining us here today. Again, we love seeing you all here. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to give us a call. We're passionate about imaging and love what we do, and we really appreciate all of you being here. So thanks very much. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Yes. And we will. Happy Halloween. And happy Halloween. You got it. So talk to you all later.